In the middle of the vast ocean, giant tuna fishing boats prepare for a long voyage. The decks are filled with dozens of kilometers of fishing lines. Sharp hooks baited with small fish and fresh squid to lure this powerful fish. Fishermen drop the lines into the deep blue water, each hook hidden in the waves waiting for fierce bites. When the giant tuna bites, the sea surface immediately erupts like a small storm. The fishing lines tensely vibrate. The sound of the reels screeches. The entire crew must join forces to keep the lines from breaking. Tuna weighing hundreds of kilograms thrash violently, jumping out of the water, silver scales sparkling under the sunlight, creating a scene that is both majestic and fierce. The battle between humans and deep-sea fish can last for hours. The sweat of the fishermen mixes with the salt water. Their hands bleed from the tight lines. But their determination does not allow them to give up. When the tuna finally exhausted, it was gradually pulled towards the side of the ship, the hunter's sharp eyes staring at the giant prey as if to make sure that victory was theirs. Immediately after, the butchering process began right on the deck to keep the fish fresh. Sharp blades skillfully cut the fish skin. Each piece of bright red meat was neatly peeled off. The fish's blood flowed red on the wooden floor, mixed with the characteristic strong fishy smell. The fishermen cut out the organs, classified the belly, back, and loin, all of which were washed and stored in the cold compartment. The work took place continuously, urgently and with great precision. Because each piece of ocean tuna was a valuable asset that could be sold for a very high price on the international market. The whole process from the time the line was dropped until the tuna was butchered was both a physical challenge and a skill, and a testament to the long experience of the fishermen in the sea. Amidst the vast waves, the image of giant tuna lying on the deck, their silvery bodies neatly dissected, leaves a harsh mark on the struggle for survival in the ocean. Where people constantly face fierce nature in exchange for precious profits and food from the sea once the giant tuna chunks are processed. The fishermen quickly pack them and put them in deep freezers to preserve their freshness. Because they understand that the value of this seafood depends largely on the purity of each piece of meat. Each tuna is clearly classified when cut: the fatty belly, the firm red loin, the muscular back. All have their own customers waiting at large fish markets and high-class restaurants. On the deck, the strong fishy smell still lingers. The red bloodstains have not been washed away, but everyone is exhausted after many hours of fighting the ocean and the giant prey. Some fishermen take a break, leaning against the side of the ship, looking out into the endless space, where long fishing lines continue to be lowered into the depths, hoping for more unexpected bites. Others quietly sharpen their knives, clean their tools, and prepare for the next cut. Because the journey never stops with just one fish. The work seemed repetitive but contained tension, excitement and extreme harshness. Each time the tuna was pulled up, it was a gamble with strength, experience and even life. When the sky turned dark, the ship's lights turned on, shining down on the dark sea, reflecting the giant processed fish lying neatly arranged. In the quiet space, there was only the steady sound of waves, the rumbling of the ship's engine and the cold smell of fresh fish in the freezer. The fishermen know that there are many more days of drifting ahead. Many more battles await, but also many hopes for a bountiful fishing season, where giant tuna will continue to be conquered and brought to the deck in the pride and fatigue of those who make a living by the sea. In the following days at sea, The rhythm of hunting and butchering giant tuna repeats itself endlessly. Every morning the fishermen drop dozens of kilometers of long fishing lines into the vast ocean, letting the wind and tides carry the bait into the deep water, where the giant tuna are hunting. Each heavy pull of the line Each grinding of the reel is a sign of a new battle. The tuna jumps out of the sea in a desperate effort. Water splashes and covers the deck, while the fishermen struggle to hold on to each taut line. When the fish are controlled, they are pulled up with auxiliary nets or iron hooks, their giant bodies crawling on the wet wooden deck. Not wasting any time, the carvers immediately set to work, sharp knives cutting strongly along the spine. Fat and meat were separated into large pieces. The sound of steel hitting bone echoed loudly, blending with the sound of the waves, creating a scene that was both creepy and haunting. The fishermen wore thick gloves. Their hands were strong, managing each cut so as not to damage the precious meat, because they knew that each wrong cut of the knife could significantly reduce its value. On the deck, the red pieces of meat were piled up, quickly washed and put into large plastic barrels, then transferred to a deep freezer at -10s of degrees, ensuring that the quality was maintained until reaching the port. After cutting one fish, the deck was doused with water again. The red blood was washed out to sea. But not long after, when another tuna was pulled up, the scene continued. Day after day, the fleet patiently clings to the open sea, both making a living and testing human limits. And each time a giant tuna is butchered on deck, it is not only a source of profit but also a testament to the perseverance and iron will of the fishermen who live off this fierce ocean on giant tuna fishing boats. The stress and fatigue not only come from conquering the prey but also extend into each subsequent processing step. When a tuna is pulled up, the crew has almost no time to rest. They immediately divide the work. Some hold the fish body, some prepare knives, others open the container to receive each piece of meat that has just been cut. The long, sharp knives like sword blades glide over the smooth skin, cutting deep into each muscle fiber, separating the meat and fat from the spine. Each cut must be decisive and neat. Because hesitation can tear the meat, losing its already highly valued value. The strong fishy smell permeates the space, seeping into every crack in the wood, permeating the fishermen's clothes, forcing them to gradually get used to that heavy smell as part of their drifting life. The bright red, greasy meat is washed with seawater, then covered with ice or sent straight to the freezer, where the cold is as cold as cutting flesh. There are tunas so large that just moving the meat requires several people to coordinate. They use ropes and pulleys to lift and put down, all taking place in a rhythmic coordination that has been trained over many seasons at sea. At night, when things calm down, the lights on the deck shine down on the fish bodies, stripped of all flesh, only the skeletons left, lying among the dark stains of dried blood. The sound of waves lapping steadily, the hum of the ship's engine, and somewhere, a few fishermen take the opportunity to sit together, exhaling in a cloud of cigarette smoke. Their eyes staring out into the vast darkness. They understand that each giant tuna successfully butchered is a step closer to providing for their families back home. but at the same time it leaves on their bodies and souls the scars of hard work and hardship that only those who live off the sea can truly understand. As days pass, the ship's freezer holds become more and more filled with giant tuna chunks that are carefully preserved and clearly marked to avoid confusion between different parts. The fishermen consider each piece of meat a valuable asset, because when they return to the mainland, they will be auctioned off at large fish markets, where qualified tuna can bring in huge sums of money. On deck, the butchering work continues without stopping. New fish are continuously pulled up from long fishing lines that are deep in the sea. Each time the blade cuts into the thick skin, the sound of tearing resounds in the air, followed by the cold sound of the knife hitting hard bone, mixed with the sound of the waves and the howling wind. The cold seawater rushed onto the deck. Washing away the fish's blood, but only a few minutes later it was dyed red by the next prey. There were times when the fishermen were exhausted, their hands shaking with exhaustion, but they still struggled to complete each cut, because delay meant the fish lost its freshness and significantly reduced its value. Under the harsh sunlight of the day, sweat mixed with the salty sea salt ran down their sunburned faces. Their eyes red from lack of sleep but still shining with determination. At night, when the ocean was covered in a thick black color, they sat next to the long fishing lines that were lowered deep, tensely waiting for the sudden jerk that signaled another giant tuna had been trapped. Amidst the vast waves, life on the ship was a series of days intertwined between hardship, danger and joy when seeing the results, so that each time they finished carving a tuna, there was a white skeleton left on the deck, mixed with the salt air and blood, as proof of the fierce and never-ending struggle for survival in the endless ocean over many weeks at sea. The ship became an isolated world, where fishermen only knew about storms. Long fishing lines and giant tuna bodies were constantly put on the deck. The salty atmosphere penetrates each hair, each fiber, the fishy smell of the fish soaked so deep that it seems unable to wash. And the hands are lumpy, bloody because of pulling the rope, because the knife is non-stop. Each giant tuna after being defeated is a physical challenge and persistence. When the meat is finished, the fishermen are almost exhausted, but their eyes still shine their hope because they know that the achievement will exchange for a fuller life for the family. On the deck of the ship, the white skeletons were thrown back, mixed into a pool of blood and red throughout the wooden floor, and then was cleaned by the sea, and then immediately continued to welcome another prey. The loop happened, day and night connection, as a harsh but familiar cycle they had lived from generations. Sometimes it was stormy, high waves like a wall. A fishing line were caught up. The ship was tilted. The fishermen still had to risk themselves to keep the result, because just a minute of letting go was the tuna hundreds of kilograms will disappear into the deep sea. When the typhoon dissolved, they rushed to clean the deck, grinding blades, preparing the container and the tunnel, to be ready for the next hunt. Although tired and dangerous, but whenever the stew is full of red fish meat, in the hearts of fishermen offers pride, because in the middle of the harsh ocean, they have used their own strength, experience and resilience to conquer the powerful giant tuna, bringing the huge profit and prove the iron will of the people living by the marine profession. Meat and carefully stored in the tunnel. On the way to the shore, they still constantly check each container, making sure the temperature always maintains the deep sound level to keep the freshness. Because just a small negligence, the value of the whole trip may decline seriously. As the ship approached the harbor, the people in their homeland were waiting. Their eyes were eager to watch, because they understood that every giant tuna on the train was the achievement of sweat, strength and danger that fishermen have faced off the coast. At the fish market, the red meat platforms were removed from the winter tunnel, evaporated cold in the early morning, then classified and carefully measured. The voice, bargain, whistle signaling the auctions rang out, and whenever a giant tuna was sold at high prices, it was the moment of victory not only of a person but also the whole crew. The knives on the deck, the sleepless nights, the unexpected storms in the sea seemed to disappear, giving way to the contentment and joy when seeing their efforts paid off. But they also understand that, after resting and returning to their families, a new trip will start again. The long fishing coils are prepared, the blades are sharpened, because the sea has never stopped challenging, and the giant tuna will continue to be the opponent and the source of life of people who are attached to the whole life with the ocean after the bustling fish market. When the giant tuna meat has been bought by traders, restaurants, or even large export companies, the fishermen can truly breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that all those days of drifting have brought them a worthy harvest. The tuna are immediately transported to modern cold storages or onto planes to other countries, where the fatty belly becomes the ingredient for premium sushi, while the firm loin is processed into bright red sashimi for the banquet table. Meanwhile, at the dock, the crew divides the money they have just earned, not forgetting to set aside a portion for ship repairs, buying longer fishing lines, replacing worn blades after hundreds of cuts, and preparing fuel for the next trip. Back home, wives, mothers, and children who had been waiting for months were finally reunited, and family meals were made warmer by the knowledge that the sacrifices and hard work of the men in the family had brought in enough money to last them for months. However, even in that peaceful moment, the fishermen's minds were still haunted by the smell of salt, the sound of waves, and the sight of fish blood on the deck, because they understood that life would not allow him to stop for too long. The ocean was always calling, and giant tuna were still swimming far out at sea, challenging those who dared to risk their lives to conquer. The cycle of life continues like that, from the time of dropping the long fishing line into the deep ocean, fiercely fighting with the giant prey, to cutting each red piece of meat on the deck, then selling it at the bustling fish market, all creating a series of harsh but also proud journeys that only real fishermen can persistently pursue for the rest of their lives. The trips continue, and soon the fishermen leave the dock, carrying new hopes and familiar worries. On the deck, the long fishing line is rolled up again, the sharp hook is carefully sharpened, each fresh bait is carefully prepared before dropping into the deep sea. Wind and waves, scorching sun, pitch black nights without a single shore light still do not deter them. Because in their minds there is always the image of giant tuna jumping out of the water, their silver bodies shimmering under the moonlight. For them, each trip to sea is a gamble, trading health, time and safety, while also desiring to reap great spoils from the ocean. Every time a tuna is hooked, the entire crew flares up like a fire, all joining forces to control and pull the giant prey onto the deck with shouts and determination. Then the sharp knife cuts down again. Each piece of fresh red flesh is separated. The fish's blood is stained red again, repeating the scenes that they have witnessed 1,000 times but never feel relieved. When finished, the meat is put into the freezer. The rest floats away with the waves, leaving dried blood stains on the deck, a salty fishy smell that never disappears. They know that this job is harsh. The life expectancy of fishermen is often much shorter than that of people on land. But the sea has become a part of their flesh and blood. a bond that they cannot leave. And so, the journey of catching and butchering giant tuna with long fishing lines continues to repeat itself. Like an endless cycle of making a living, both heroic and bitter, leaving an indelible mark in the life of every fisherman who depends on the ocean on each long voyage. Fishermen gradually get used to the harsh rhythm of life in the open sea, where day and night are no longer clearly defined. Only the waves and the sound of the fishing line shaking signal a new battle. Giant tuna are continuously pulled up, each time a physical and mental challenge. And then after the prey lies collapsed on the deck, the work of butchering begins again in a decisive rhythm. Knife cuts, blood sprays, bright red flesh is exposed under the harsh sunlight or the yellow lights of the deck. Each piece of meat is transferred to the freezer, creating a real treasure in the middle of the ocean. The fishermen are tired, sweat mixed with the fishy smell, but they still grit their teeth to work, because every minute of delay means losing the value of the product. When they see the hold gradually filling up, their hearts are filled with both pride and heavy thoughts, because they understand that each piece of meat is an exchange for blood, strength and the danger that always lurks at sea. There were calm nights. They sat on the deck looking at the moon shining on the water, thinking of their family back home, thinking of the children waiting for their father to return with a full wallet. There were also days when the waves were fierce, the fishing lines were tight, the ship was rocking as if it was about to capsize, and in that life or death moment, they could only cling to their experience, praying that the ship would be steady and make it through. But despite the hardships, the cycle of hunting and butchering giant tuna continued, because it was their profession, their flesh and blood, the only way they had chosen to survive in the vast ocean, where each giant booty was not only a precious food for humanity, but also a testament to the resilience of those who lived on the waves and the power of the ocean. And then when the trip ended, the ship, laden with freezers full of giant tuna meat, headed back to the mainland, leaving behind long days of struggling with the waves and blood on the deck. At the moment of docking, the fishermen not only brought back their products but also stories, harsh memories imprinted in their minds. Blocks of fish meat were transferred from the freezer to the port. The cold air rose like mist, mixed with the shouts of traders, the sound of weighing, the sound of urgent bookkeeping. The whole space was filled with the smell of fresh fish, the smell of sea salt, the smell of engine oil. But for the fishermen, it was the smell of life, the smell of achievement. The auction began. Each giant tuna was introduced. Buyers competed to pay. The numbers kept increasing, and the moment the hammer fell, the value of the whole trip was decided. Joy mixed with fatigue. The sunburned faces were radiant. They knew that their families would be full. Their children would have money to study. Their wives would have money to support themselves. But after those short moments of happiness, they prepared for the next journey. The long fishing lines were replaced. The knives were sharpened. The hold was cleaned, ready for a new fishing season. The harsh cycle of life continues. From the ocean to the fish market. From blood on deck to money in hand. And from hardship to pride. For fishermen, longline fishing and butchering giant tuna is not only a way to make a living, but also a destiny, an endless journey associated with human strength, sacrifice and desire to conquer the vast ocean. Fishermen returning from a trip often do not have much time to rest, because after only a few days of reuniting with their families, they have to return to port to continue preparing for a new journey. The ship is refueled, the long fishing lines are rolled up and the worn ones replaced. Each hook is sharpened to a shine, and the freezer is thoroughly cleaned to be ready to be filled with huge spoils. These men carry the callousness of the profession, rough hands. Tanned bodies, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. But their gazes are still fiery, because they understand that out there in the open sea, giant tuna are still waiting for them to conquer. The life cycle of the sea is harsh and almost endless, leaving the dock, dropping the long fishing line into the ocean, fiercely fighting with the prey, then butchering, preserving, auctioning, and continuing. In the midst of the vast waves, they have turned life and death struggles into daily work, turning blood and sweat into food and clothing for the whole family. And despite the constant dangers, fishing lines can suddenly break. Huge waves can sink the boat. Sharp knives can cause injuries. Fishermen still stick with their profession. Like an undeniable destiny, they know that each trip not only brings profit, but also affirms the bravery, strength and resilience of humans in the face of majestic and fierce nature. Therefore, the journey of catching and butchering giant tuna with long lines continues. Repeating itself through many generations, leaving behind an endless story of making a living, sacrifice and pride in the vast ocean. Each generation of fishermen follows one another, from father to son, from the boys who used to sit on the dock watching their fathers return with the strong smell of fish and the sound of waves, to when they grow up they officially set foot on the deck. Firmly holding the long line to face the ocean, they learn to patiently observe the water surface, recognize the fragile signs that the tuna are moving,